The faculty fire and say, no, skip ahead.
Yeah, so thick. Well, you know, we printed it twice in case you lose that. It's really one. We have a few extras here for folks that are not here right at the. Okay, so although I'm sure you love the dulcet tones of my voice, we're gonna try to go ahead and mix up a little bit and give you guys some other voices here. So we'll start with Article 1 and we'll have Isaac take that one.
Can I ask a question before you get started?
Yes.
The yellow versus the blue.
Blue is just like not meant to change what the contract says. It's like fixing grammatical problems.
Got
and
it.
things like that.
That's what I thought, but
Yeah, you're right. Yellow is changed.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, so the first one is in the blues capitalization. Under 1.2, about creating a new classified job. We'd like to strike word invited to give input and change it to shall give approval before there's a status change. 1.3, just changing 90 work days to 90 calendar days. Below. Like strike 1.5.4 completely. And that deals with hiring a person to deal with a single special needs student. And 155 is changing the word can to will, and that is about earning benefits during bus earning time. That's all we have for.
Then 4, because Jennifer wanted lots of changes here, so I made lots of changes for her. No, I'm just kidding. The only change really from the MOU, there's 2. One is we call it the Mary Mercy clause because right now it says she has to sign everything and she's one person and there's multiple buildings. We want to expand that to just the leadership, you know, the vice president, the secretary, the treasurer, that kind of idea. So we have a little more coverage area. So it's not all on Mary's shoulders. And then if you turn the rest of the blue, why it's blue is because it's the MOU that's been just ported in. So double check, make sure I got it all right, but I'm pretty sure this is what I had anyway. You get to the very last page. We want to add a few things to under miscellaneous, and this is all new language that we're proposing here. Obviously, we want you to maintain the standards of the contract, which is the first one there. We want you to follow the laws. That's the second one there. And the third one is the district follow their own board policies. And you created them for a reason. And then the next 2 are a little more in depth. We'd like to have access to some interpreters. I believe we have this right under House Bill 2016 already, but I think it's just clear if we put it in the contract so that we don't have to quibble about it later. And essentially what we're doing is if we have a meeting where we have somebody who, you know, English is not their first language, we want to be able to communicate with them effectively in our union meetings or for other things of that nature. And then this last one came out of from the members from a concern about some essentially surveys that are given out to rate your coworker kind of thing. And it seems to be creating some division on our side. And we didn't like that. So we'd like to remove those. And that's the extent of the changes on 4. Any questions?
Can you give me an example of the last one? I don't know.
Survey?
Yeah. Is there,
Can you
like,
speak to this, Marcy?
I know the one that came up most recently was an anonymous survey that was done on a classified staff member where people are allowed to give feedback anonymously. And that is just problematic because the person really, one, as we all see on social media, when people have the ability to be anonymous, people tend to be a little more vicious. And it doesn't really give you the opportunity to face the information and give, you know, as a give and take. You don't know who's saying what, you don't know where it's coming from necessarily sometimes, and it's not fair. There was, I know that, I don't think there's been a push lately, but there was a push a few years back where doing those anonymous surveys were a thing that were being asked if people would do them. And I know that management had done them where you put out and asked for input. And we're hearing from employees who've heard of it or have experienced it, that it just, that anonymity doesn't bring out the best in people.
Uh-huh.
And that we don't want to see those happening. We don't think that that is a positive evaluation tool, and it does cause division and hard feelings and lots of other stuff. I'm not the one who brought this necessarily all the way, so don't have all the information.
Okay, I just
Yeah.
wasn't, I can't think of those happening, so I was just trying to understand that part.
They have.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think the key takeaway for us is that, it creates division amongst our folks where they don't know if somebody's saying something and
Yeah,
we
you
don't like them. they're
you don't
saying,
Yeah, I don't, you don't have to, I just, again, I just didn't understand.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so moving to Article 10 is the next one I show here. So obviously we start the top part because we're gonna be doing new stuff there. And since you really referred to the index for the wages, we set that to a separate document as well, just to make it easier. And it'll depend on what we do in this contract, if this language changes to something similar to this or something else, depending on what we do. But as we're proposing a 1 year at the moment, it's not really applicable. And the other steps already happened at the 15, we want to get rid of that. So you go down below here. This again talks about translation of language. And we believe that this should be a position that should come when these people are being utilized. Typically, you have people who you pay in a classification in most schools to do this work. They go home for the day. So they grab the janitor because they might speak whatever language this person that's right there at the door wants to, the student or the teacher or whatever, is trying to figure this out with a parent or something. In those situations, we want to see these folks get compensated for their knowledge because they're essentially people you're going to use on the fly, right? So hopefully it's not a lot, but we've heard some instances where people are being asked to do this kind of translation without really being, compensated properly in our opinion for it. So that's the point of this. And it'd be broken up. I think I have it broken up here in 1 hour. They get a bump for 1 hour of their pay. It goes longer than that, obviously, for the time, but it'd be a minimum of 1 hour, and then whatever hours working on that.
So in essence, like we're working on a classification.
Kind of similar to the same idea, yeah. I think that's a fair analogy. If you turn the page here, so this is something that we hear a lot when people start and they miss by a few days or whatever, and it's like, well, if they were there for 90 calendar days is what a lot of districts do. It's kind of hard to explain to them the next year why they didn't get a raise, and then everybody else, more that started close to the time they did. So we'd like to change that down to 90 days just to make it a little simpler process for people to understand. And then below that, under 10.2.2, reason why we have that language is because this is discipline, right? If you're going to be using this language, and we would like to know about it because obviously, we represent our folks and we want to make sure that we're aware that they're getting disciplined in this fashion. So that's the point of that. But the really interesting one, at least I hope you find it interesting, is the next one here. We kind of have broken up. This is kind of what we came up with as an example. We're definitely willing to, as in any of our proposals, are willing to look at any better ideas you might have or something that takes up less paper, But we wanted to try to go ahead and give people, credit for further education becoming more valuable to the district. And that's what this attempts to do. So like once a year, I think we have December in there, we have, we do a check and we say, oh, look, Marcy's gotten her AA or something. So she would get, that one-time bonus. Now she doesn't get that every year, but she would get it, once she has it, she's attained it and this language is in effect, she would get it. And then if she went and got her 4-year degree, then, that would be another bump, right? But she wouldn't pay her every year for that. It'd be a one-time cash bonus to recognize their hard work, making themselves more valuable for you here at the district. And there's a lot of different examples here I'll let you look through, but this is by no means an all-inclusive list. This is just what we put together as a way to start the conversation to try to figure out a way for these folks that get this extra education become more valuable to you, a way to reward them. And that carries over to the back page here, a little bit on the top. Now, maybe this is me, but I don't see people acting out of classification. I usually see them working. So that's the change on the top there for that one. It's just to make it, I think, reflect better what most people think of as working on a classification. And you'll see that change again below down there. Now you guys have 5 days before they get that assignment. We wanted to drop that down a little because we understand you might be in a pinch and a couple days it might take you to get a sub in line or whatever. But 5 seems like a little bit more than is probably needed for that. So that's why we made that change. 10.3. So this one here, I think, are you okay to talk about this, Allison? Do you want to talk about 10.3.1? Because I think you're kind of living it, right?
Yeah, 10.3, do I have permission?
Yes,
Okay,
of
okay.
course. Yes.
10.3 part 1, we wanted to specifically state in the contract that if workload increases for an employee due to absence of other employees, transfer, laid off, vacant positions, the said employee who is taking on the additional workload will be given the appropriate amount of time and hours to do that work and complete their job duties that are expected of them and the other position that's being placed upon them.
Do you want to give some examples that you've been through with that?
For sure, yeah. So I recently moved from the Spock 1 position at Franklin and Adams to the high school Spock position. It is the same classification, same range, but during that transition period, I was taking on the duties of 2 full-time employees. So it was fairly stressful during that transition period, but I understand it has to happen when employees move on and while you're waiting for coverage for other positions. But we wanted to state this in the contract in cases where other employees are experiencing this so that they are given that additional amount of time to actually complete their work because things were getting dropped. There's no way that one person can get 2 jobs done in 40 hours a week. So we wanted to put this specifically in the contract for those purposes.
Thank you.
So just for clarification, is it looking at using your example? So you said working 2 full-time positions, like working and being paid for 80 hours, if you use your example?
Oh, sorry, no, I was just working the 2 positions while getting paid for 1. Yeah.
I think more in line with discussions that we've had, and you should have some direct experience I wanted to speak to, is that, anybody who's covered another job, you can't get it all done, right? But you might be able to get part of it done, but really, you may not have hours to get your job done. So if I'm an 8-hour employee and it takes me to get the key things you want done in another job, like 10 hours, we want that 10 hours and not expect it to be done in 8 hours, right? I mean, it kind of makes sense, but anybody who's having to cover for somebody knows that's kind of, it's a dicey proposition because what do you get done? Because not all can be done, right? It's just the nature of how it is. So we just want to make sure if they're expecting them to do these extra things, that they get the time they need to do that. It may not be another full 8 hours. Let's hope not, because then they only got 8 hours of sleep. But it might be like, okay, we're gonna give you a couple extra hours to these key components need to be done in this job over here, right? It has to be done. And that's more what we're talking about. And it's fully within your guys' control. So, but we just want to make sure that that is happening so people aren't feeling, I think the terms that I heard were getting pressure to cut corners to try to get their part of their work done because they have to get this other part over here done and then, create safety or performance issues for whatever, That's the intent of the language. If you have a better way of saying that, of course, like I always say, please come back with something, we'll take a look at it. But that's the core essence of what we're trying to get at. Okay, on 10.4, we kind of divided these into 2 things because they really are speaking 2 different things. Under our 10.41, this employee volunteers to go to a lower paid position. So they would keep their wage, would slot in to wherever, that gets them. And then they would be frozen out on their steps until it gets caught up, to where they're at. Because they're voluntarily leaving. Now 10.4.2, if somebody's being disciplined specifically under the contract, we can understand why they might be being moved to a lower pay classification because that is discipline. So that's what the big 2 differences between the 2 of these sections really are. That's why we split them up.
So Hobie, let me just clarify to make sure I
Sure.
understand how you wrote this. So 10.4.1, the person chooses to go to a lower classification, they go to that appropriate range. But you may be placing them at the maximum end of the salary schedule. is what
Wherever
I'm
their
hearing,
wage
correct?
is at, yeah, they'll be frozen there on steps until the rest of the groups catch up to them. right?
So tell me the thinking behind that when the person chooses to go to that different classification.
So the thinking is that they're a person that you value already, right? They just want to change or want less responsibility, whatever it might be. They're not somebody who has created a problem, discipline problem for you, like second category here, where, you know, they're being punished essentially, right? And that's the difference between those two pieces. That's the idea. So, but if you have a better way of saying it, like I would say, and I'll say again, probably, feel free to come back with some other language. That's what we're trying to do there. You turn to the next page, about halfway down. This one I heard from a few different people about. A lot of districts, what they do is that I work with anyway, when you retire, you keep your benefits, excuse me, keep your pay rate, but you go to the bottom of the list like any other new employee for layoff, return, all that stuff. So you're already, all those different things. That's what this is attempting to do, is to try to keep them, so hopefully they stay with you while they're working back and don't go somewhere else. That's the nuts and bolts that we're trying to do here. And this is the language we came up with that would hopefully get us to that point. So you can retain the folks that you need to retain, you know, for the half a year or whatever they want to stick around. And then on the next page, under 10.5 on the longevity pay. So we don't know if we have the right number for you guys here or not, but we just came up with a simpler, we thought was a simpler way of doing this, which is employees that reach the top step, they get a 5% annual raise. That would recognize them for their length with you guys. Like I said, we probably want to talk about what that amount is, but we're trying to simplify the process, just saying when you get to the top, this is your raise going forward, right? For how many years you continue to work here for your step. And then under 10.9, now Jennifer, you might need to help me here. We put some language in here, but I thought there was some other specific language, but I couldn't seem to find that. Did you have some language for that meeting you guys had that we might want to add to this section?
Well, tell me more, I mean, what you're looking for.
I don't know if this captures what you guys talked about in your subcommittee meeting. So I'll give you a second to read it. But frankly, I don't know if this captures what you talked about in your meeting, now that I look at it again.
Well, we had conversation about the leave. I'm not sure this is how I would write it.
Sure.
But Mary and I did talk about making sure that we looked at incorporating a piece.
Yeah, so if you can help us out with that, I mean, I just didn't have that piece just yet. I know you guys were working on it pretty diligently, and it's that we're not, you know, go to waste. So this is what we propose in the meantime, and I'm kind of leaving a holding spot for you guys for that language you guys worked on, to see if we could maybe put that in here too.
Can I go back to your longevity pay?
Absolutely.
So, and maybe this is coming with your financial proposal, but the way the current salary schedule is set up because of the every 3 years after step 6, it looks like you're striking all of that. And so is there a different schedule or method to what you're proposing?
Yeah, those become regular steps and not, you wouldn't be froze out for 3 years.
Okay.
That's what that would be. And that's why the 5% first step would go at the end of that. Okay. Good question. Good question. All right. So under 10.10, which is travel reimbursement, we just switched this up to we believe is the correct, the IRS, which is maybe the district even follows. We also, I believe, feel free to double check, but I believe that what I quoted down there is the state regs for paying expenses for meals and lodging. So, I mean, we should be following the law, right? So that's why I have quoted there. Please feel free to take a peek at that, make sure I got that right. And then under 10.11, so we wanted to make sure, this might be something you're doing already. We wanted to make sure that our folks are getting credit for the time they spend to go to the class to get their food handler's license. A lot of places have the person come on site or they do it different ways, but we just want to make sure that is happening for our folks, so they're not having to go get this license for this job without getting paid for that. And then number 10.1.4. Did you want to talk, when you want to talk about this issue with the child transfer? Or just people thing?
This is just to match the, I guess you would call it Me Too language almost, for to match the certified contract. The children transfer language was updated in the teacher contract, and we're looking to match that. I think the only changes in wordings is we changed it to staff from the word teacher.
And then I think 10.15 of the payments we have. Basically, we want to make sure that folks are getting paid, that you guys set up some kind of deal with somebody, like a lot of places do. You go there, like you show up, like you do a drug test, something you have a group you deal with. They show up, they go there, they get their fingerprints done, rather than having to pay and then reimburse. It just seems like an extra step that's, cumbersome to the member that I don't know why we would need it, but maybe you'll tell me why. I don't know, but that's what we're looking to do there, is just to make it so they show up to the provider that does the fingerprinting and they do it. And then you have an account with them or something, so that they don't have to pay out and then get reimbursed later. Hopefully not lose the receipt and all that good stuff. That's the idea. So we have something here also, training pay, or sometimes it's called mentor pay, where you have a senior person who works with a junior person, usually a new hire, and they're training them essentially on the most efficient ways to use the district's processes to do their job, to basically you're taking their knowledge and trying to make that download into that new employee, right? So recognizing that that's something that is, a bit of work for the person doing it, really taking on an additional thing. And also it's something the district controls, right, completely, whether that happens or doesn't happen or how much it happens. We thought there should be a pay bump for that, recognizing their experience, and giving them a pay bump while they're doing that work. And that's what we came up with. I'm told you're very familiar with the next section, Jennifer, before my time, but I guess you guys had some time you spent on it. So I'll just say that this is something that came up and something that I think folks want to take another look at. So I'll leave it for you and your team to talk about, since you're very much familiar with this part.
Yeah, I mean, just so you know, we have a current MOA on this. I mean, it's been in place.
I showed it expired.
I think we signed a new one.
Well, I know I didn't. So if it's 19, I thought what I found was expired, but I mean, if it's an MOA, it might just be easier just to roll it in the contract and be done with it, right? Kind of like the section below pandemic pay.
We did want to expand to not just be feces and to all body
Yeah.
fluids.
There is some slight change to this, like she said, there's like all body fluids, not just feces, because obviously that's kind of, I won't go into it, but it's definitely not pleasant to have to deal with that stuff. But most of it is exactly what you've seen, but please do take a second to look at it when you get in caucus. And down below, I have the pandemic pay in blue, because that's an MOU we already have. We're just rolling into the contract in this proposal. And then I think under 10.19, how the situation, look at that. Do you mind speaking to this, Isaac? I think that's some examples. Sure.
So this would be situations where you're dealing with something that sort of goes outside the bounds of your job description, outside of the expectations of your job description, whether it be facing violence or just an undue hardship on the job and being paid a differential during those hours that you're required to work in those situations or with those students.
And we realize that that is a little broad. We do have at the end there, you'll say, determined by the building administrator. We want to give them some latitude, because not every situation is going to be exactly the same. So it very much will be a case by case. So we want to make sure that folks, hopefully use their best judgment, and we'll look at that. This is, and I'll say this isn't a Corvallis issue. I think this is probably a statewide issue. All of my chapters are dealing with, there's a lot of kids hitting teachers, hitting people, fighting, doing all kinds of things that I didn't hear about before COVID as much. It was like a big deal that you heard about that stuff when it happened before COVID. Now it seems almost like background noise. So in all of my chapters, there's some version of them trying to put this forward to try to figure out how to handle this kind of situation. And then 10.20, 10.20, additional cost of living raise. I don't think this will shock you that after what we went through this year, we threw in this language. I'll let you read it. It's pretty straightforward as a way to try to mitigate. I mean, if this language is in your contract, this will be the first year you used it in 25 years, but we feel we need to have some kind of protection against that again happening. To make it a little more palatable for our folks, we get stuck in the middle of the contract with this huge cost of living increase that just comes out of nowhere. So we got this language here to try to help address that. Hopefully get us through to the next bargaining session, give us a little bump to get through the next bargaining session so we can have a discussion. That's why that language is in there. But I went back and looked at, I think the cost of living jump above 3% hasn't happened for a long time. So it would be safety language in there, but I don't know how can we use it, but we'd still better have it. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Just on the first page of Article 10, one small thing was missed. In the current contract, we had recognized the top 3 languages and we were proposing that to be 5.
Yep, she's right. It is in there, but I didn't gloss over
It
it.
was easy to-
You are, Miss Mercy.
What page is that on, Marcy?
It was the first page of Article 10.
Yeah, it's like literally the start
The
of it.
tiny little piece of yellow there.
Oh, got it.
It was
Thanks.
easy to miss.
Yeah. Thanks.
So I'm going to be doing Article 11 insurance, and some of the changes in 11.1 is minor, which fixing the date. I don't know the changes. 11.2 is just grammatical. Under 11.3 cap and cost, we are currently at 1,240, and we are proposing to increase to $1,265 and remove the line that says there will be a limited reopening for insurance during the 2021 and 2022 school year, since those are past dated. Under 11.4.1, this is a bigger change. We are proposing that for the sake of insurance only, that 30 hours be considered full-time for insurance benefits. So that would raise anybody who works at least 30 hours a week to being eligible for the full-time per rate for insurance. Under 11.4.2, half-time employees would no longer be defined as working at least 20 hours, and be defined as working at least 19.95 hours. I'm kind of skipping over the blue, which is just grammar. Tell me if you want me to go back to that at all. 11.4.3, following along the lines of the 30 hours a week is full-time. That would mean that 6 hours per day is full-time, not 7. So that's a change there to reflect and follow along. And then in that same case, again, mentioning the 30 hours is a work week for full-time equivalency for the sake of insurance. The scale has been updated, so 6 to 8 hours is 100%. 5 to 5.99 is 85%. 4 to 4.99 is 75%, and 3 to 3.99 is 60%. And again, under 11.4.4, changing from 20 to 19.95 hours per week for being considered part-time. Under 11.5, the change is just grammatical, changing to the abbreviation.
Marcy, can you pause for a minute?
Yep.
I want to make sure I understand your 19.995, where it says part-time employees are ineligible. But if you go above your chart and you moved it to 3, that's 15 hours.
Yeah, this should have been, when it was copied and pasted. If you want to strike out 3 to 3.99, that's what that shouldn't be on there. It should just say 3.99. That's where the 1995 comes from.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's the luxury
So
of
it's
copy
not
and
a
paste.
range on that last one, it's just
399.
399.
That's all me. Copied and pasted and got lazy. We'll see what happens.
Thank you. I didn't get that.
I caught it when you were reading it.
That's fair.
And then if there's no other questions, we'll move to Isaac, who is going to present Article 14.
Okay, so the first thing in 14.1 for reasoning, like to strike 3 and make it 5 days. And then adding the language entitled to an additional 5 days per death as needed. Striking the language sort of about discretionary. Who qualifies under appendix C and awarding additional days. And then adding the language that the days don't need to be taken consecutively. And raising theirs. If a family member died, you may need that day off. The funeral might be, any of those days off. Striking, they would report to under 14.2.1 personal leave from district to immediate supervisor. 14.2.5, striking who has worked the full year. And that's for being paid for unused personal days, which is the end of June, get paid out. Under 14.3, district closure, delayed start. We'd like to strike 1 day and make it 10 days. And then the rest of the strikeouts there, kind of cleaning up that language to make it fit. I think we added the word or changed the word website as far as reporting school cancellations and closures and delays. And then under 14.4.1, 14.4.2, and 14.4.3, we're changing, striking may to will, and that's for using district closure leave and striking out or personal leave. 14.5 is just clerical. 14.6 professional leave, we'd like to add that an employee may request a sub to be paid for through Article 16.1. Attend trainings and that they remain in paid status during that time. 14.4.7, some pronoun language. And then at the end, we added during normal working hours, and that has to do with somebody who might face disciplinary action for trying to perform a second job while they're taking sick leave. That they only can face that disciplinary action during their normal working hours, not after or before. Striking out the word usually in the following paragraph. And then at the bottom, when you're striking the word not, which changes this whole intention, and that's so that sick leave can be considered as terminal leave in time and dollars, and that it can be reported to PERS. I have more on that in the section coming up. Below that, that sick leave can be awarded in 15-minute increments rather than hourly. And that the district shall follow the Oregon sick leave law, including mental health wellness days. That's the very bottom of the paragraph. 14.8 under jury duty. Striking out the language about if they have at least 2 hours of their workday left, and changing that to if the district hasn't hired a sub for that day, or if 50% of the workday is remaining. Fourteen 14.9, legally, we'd like to strike that whole bottom portion out, that they won't be paid CABC, basically whatever the involving situations where the litigation might be initiated by the person against the district, appearing as a representative or appearing as a party of interest. 14.10, striking out in the district's judgment and adding at the end that leave will be granted and not limited. And that's for leave without pay and leave of absence. And we'd like to strike the current language altogether in 14.11 and replace it with employees shall have a choice of cashing out 100% of their sick leave at the end of retirement or sending it first. That's part 14.12, adding that a 210 employee shall receive 1 discretionary work day a month that they can split into a full day or half days. And coordinating that with their supervisor.
So can I have you go back to 14.10?
Yes.
And can you give me a little bit more information of what you mean by not limited?
Well, our currently is limited to a year, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think the concerns I heard were that a couple of things, one, that they might need more time than the limit in here, but also that it's kind of like, well, we're gonna give you this amount of time, to give you this amount of time, and they might be different, right? And that, there could be reasons for that, but there also could not be reasons. So I think we're trying to say that we want to give the leave as it's needed, right? You know, I'm going in for all this, you know, cancer treatment stuff, and I gotta be out for a year or a year and a month. We want to see that be something that they would have to say, okay, we can let you do that. The understanding, you know, insurance stuff, you're happy you don't have working hours, things change there, but I think that's generally the idea there.
Don't hold me to add in, and just because this is a feeling, I've never taken the leave without pay, but just a feeling we hear from members too, is that frequently if they need to take time off for a family reunion or a wedding, they hear the phrase, once in a lifetime, and that doesn't set well with the members. And feeling is that if they are willing to go without the pay and they have found a sub to cover their job and their job is, they would like to have a different lens put on it instead of that.
So I'm curious if there was discussion about, and where that came about is people were scheduling vacations, those who work just the time with students, right? We are only with students so many days. So then people would schedule their vacations during their non-typical break times.
Yes.
And just assume because it's not paid, it doesn't cost the district anything. It actually impacts kids. And so we did actually put parameters in place to try and indicate you do have breaks scheduled. You actually have quite a bit of time, not everyone, depending on your work calendar. And so just being thoughtful about when you do schedule your vacations or your times. And so you also have personal time, right? Trying to get people to understand that we're here for kids and we're here for that period of time. This, I guess the reason I'm asking for clarification is to understand that. So thank you. That not limited, and again, I don't know if this came up, could be 3 years, right? I mean, when you talk about it that way, and I don't think that's the intent, but you're
I
really
think
leaving
we're
it
looking
wide.
to find that balance and that maybe some language back, some way to we always put children first. And we do, our employees are great about that. But because we work in education, doesn't mean that the person planning the family reunion, or the person planning the wedding, or the person who passed, and under the current thing, it's going to be a big thing and it's more than the bereavement leave would cover, or things happen, and just wanting to understand that there's a immediate in between place, language wise, between what's currently written and being more responsive to that balance. Not sure what I'm going to say.
I think part of what I've taken in from the folks is that it feels a bit inflexible and a little bit, you know, subjectional. Well, maybe I like you better than I like you. Somebody give you more time when you ask for it. If we have a process that we're never going to fix that 100%. It's just human beings have certain natures, unfortunately. But if we can figure that out to the point where we can have some better language that allows for a little more of a fluid exchange there, I think of we're going to generally do it this way. I think that would address a lot of what I'm hearing too, because it does feel like doesn't feel like there's one way of doing it, you know, that is generally the same way. It feels like there's like 50 different ways it's been done, right? And not all those are, some of those are case by case, but I would say not all those are. And so I think that's what we're trying to figure out, you know.
I mean, I appreciate that. And I guess I'd wonder who's been denied. Because I can tell you I've not denied leaves. We try and support people and recognize, yes, it is a once in a lifetime, trying to be thoughtful again of how much time we're here. So.
Yeah, and I think some of it might be things that didn't get to your level, right? I mean, that's totally things that happen. The supervisor says no, and the person doesn't realize that they have the open door policy, right? So I suspect there's a component of education for both of us on both of our sides to talk to our different people. But this is where it's coming from, just so you have a good
Yeah,
indication.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
And then I wanted to go back to 4.9 for a second, because I wanted to say 4.9 The reason why we struck this is that I believe with 2016, this creates a problem for us under the law. And then the ABC there, and then under the original 411, I struck this because it's no longer valid. We addressed this in Article 4. Does that make sense?
We'll take a look, yeah.
Yeah, that's why that's been struck. It should come out of context with Article 4.
And Jennifer, if I could add, or 10 team, if I could add for 14.12, whether it's for anybody who has a 210 calendar or less. It may not need to be said, but the concept behind that is, so a lot of our classified, I think of our EA staff who work the same days as the kids, they get very little time to do anything about getting ready for the year and get going. And then their last day of work is the same day as the kids. And this is about giving them some options for, to get prepared, whether they want to take 4 hours at the beginning of the year and 4 at the end, or all at the beginning or all at the end, is to give them just a little bit more work time to get ready or to close up.
With that, you have the key.
Marion's gonna really do 15. I will try to do justice to it. So 15 is sick leave bank. Under 15.2, we are proposing to strike limited term from employees who are excluded from the being part of the sick leave bank. Under 15.3, we are asking that it say that if somebody is going to voluntarily terminate from the membership in the sick leave bank, that the notice be given in writing to the Human Resources Department and the union. Going forward to, again, and skipping the blue, which is grammatical, but if you have any questions on the grammatical, please let us know. Under 15.5, we are proposing to add a line at the end that says employees may donate up to 200 hours to the sick leave bank at the employee's discretion, giving an employee the ability to donate more if they want to. Under 15.6C, we're asking that the language be updated to include not just physical illness and disability, but also mental. We know that we have not heard of any cases where the district has denied that, but we also know that members many times read things for themselves to see what's allowed, and we just want to have it very clear to them that needing time off for mental health reasons is accessible and doable. Under 15, sorry, lost myself for a second. Under 15.7, the third paragraph, we just want to remove the words upon request, and that we want to receive the biannual report biannually and not only when it's requested. So that would be the sick leave bank.
And just under 15.6C. That's okay. It's we changed from 7 to 5 because that's the current policy when we bring in a note and all those kinds of things. So we're just trying to keep that all kind of same structure there. Now we're even. Cut that one
Yeah.
over. Well, you get another chance. It's your turn again.
So, that's good. That's right. So Article 23 safety. We were so happy to get the building blocks of the safety piece in the contract 3 years ago. And we're just looking to expand it a little bit and make some changes with things that we've learned over the last 3 years as we've worked with what was written. So Section 2 would be reworded, any employee who is required to work in situations that may carry potential for bodily injury, removing the word serious, shall receive information on their potential work environment and be provided necessary training for such duties and or situations prior to being placed in said environment. They will be trained before they start doing the work within that environment. If employee notifies their administrator / supervisor that training is insufficient with regards to safety or scope, the training will be reevaluated and additional training offered. Striking out the line that would have been there that says if training is deemed insufficient, additional training opportunities must be sought. Training and any associated costs shall be paid for by the district in accordance with state and federal law. adding in this new sentence, safety plans shall be reviewed at least once a quarter. If changes are made, changes will immediately be shared with all affected staff who work with the student. We've heard concerns that safety plans are changed and the staff who are working with the students don't hear about it. So we just really want to address that to make sure that safety piece is in place. Number 3, we left alone. In number 4, if a bargaining unit member is assaulted, we added the word injured or threatened in connection with district employment. The bargaining unit member will immediately notify the principal and or their supervisor and will complete the district's incident report form. Copies of this form will be available at each building and online. We're then proposing to add the wording immediately following such incidents, the employee will be placed on a break for a minimum of 15 minutes. During this time, the employee is excused from their job duties and must not return to work again until at least 15 minutes have passed and their supervisor deems them ready to return to work. This additional break is separate from regularly scheduled breaks and must be taken separately after each incident. We're just hearing from some employees that it's not uniformly being offered in their buildings. It can be very subjective based on the school and also sometimes the program. That some programs have maybe more physicality, so not feeling that same support. Not going to speak for that per se because it's not firsthand knowledge. So going into number 5, we are just asking to remove the wording at the discretion of the superintendent or human resources director about having duties assigned pending an investigation if they report something unsafe. Many times that's handled almost immediately at the building level. It wouldn't, they have them go work in classroom, in Kim Patton's classroom instead of Byron's classroom, while they reevaluate things. So it's not something that the HR or superintendent necessarily does. They just have them work in a different area within the building. So we're just wanting to recognize that's not always how it happens. In section 6, it starts, if any student is causing injury to staff members on a patterned or routine basis, the school administration or employee subject to injury may request to convene a response team in order to review and update the student safety plan. We're proposing the wording to be added after that says once the request for review is made, the response team has 10 work days to conduct their review and inform the employee of the outcome. The affected employee will be invited to provide input and be part of the team if possible. And the employee has the right to request district review and may appeal the outcome to the assistant superintendent. The thought here is that we've heard from some employees when they've made it that they haven't really got that follow-up or it's been really prolonged. So putting an expectation of the wrap, and that if the employee doesn't feel like what's happened at the building level is sufficient, that they have a next step, which we are open, currently identified as the assistant superintendent, but could be something else depending on, Number 7, the association president versus the word chapter, and at least one standing designee will be on the member of the district safety committee. And then we are putting in the request for consideration of a new section 8. And this is kind of in response to the pandemic that we've all experienced, and that we can't say would never happen again and other health things, but the district cannot implement or require any health measures that are not required by federal or state without an MOU from OSCA. Any measures agreed to under an MOU with OSCA would expire when the state and federal requirements expire. So like if I'm going to make this up, but say it was required to be vaccinated, we can't require employees to be vaccinated if the state or federal isn't requiring it. And if they quit requiring it, we would quit requiring it type of thing. And then any sick leave that staff is required to take in order to comply with this section will not be charged to their sick leave balance and will instead be paid by district. And then, but this would not apply to anybody taking a long-term leave or a leave of absence in order to not comply with the mandate, rule, law. So that would be currently section 23 being proposed.
All right, the last section is 24. And the first strike that you see there is the waiver. We believe that that's no longer appropriate since we have a, so I can say right, Mahola Falls, I hope I'm saying that right, decision from the appellate court. It says zipper clauses are illegal, so that's why we're striking that. Under 24.2, We just want to clear up what type of bargaining we're talking about there. There's bargaining should be in accordance with, you know, the 90-day bargaining under ORS there. And then we cleaned up the end here because we don't like gotcha clauses. We can just continue therefore year to year unless one of both parties. I mean, obviously, we're gonna come to you or you're gonna come to us when this thing expires and want to have some discussions. So we just made it more, got rid of that, so we're not stuck with it if something weird happens and, you know. Just said on the 15th of April, we'll meet to begin discuss the agreement, so it makes it real clear. And then with that, we have it all, well, except for pay, don't want to forget that. do we?
So you're proposing
Wanna
one
jump over
year,
to the pay? Oh, I guess we're doing presentation first.
but you're proposing 1 year. You
At this point, yes.
enjoy it.
Right. Not so much that we enjoy it, is that if we read more things, we can read more years, right? The idea.
So can we take a restroom break before your
Absolutely.
presentation?
Absolutely not. No, of course.
All right, thanks.
We got a presentation and we got
You know this format.
Back on record? All right. So you did the presentation, Al?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm just gonna look at you and just like right at you.
Oh, I can look at it forward. I like turning to watch and I
Yeah.
can look straight.
Yeah, we have it up on all the screens. Okay, so we wanted to, before we brought forth our wage proposals, we wanted to do kind of an overview of the cost of living in relation to the classified wages in Corvallis. So currently, we're gonna look at the cost of living increases that staff and community members have had to work with and deal with. So according to livingcosts.org, which is a website that goes out through over 2,300 national and international cities comparing cost of living data to the consumer price index, it estimates that for a single person living with rent in Corvallis, it will cost them $1,500 a month in expenses to survive in Corvallis. And for a family of four, that jumps up to $3,800 with the cost of rent. Without rent, we can see that that number is slightly lower, but it's still in the $602K range just for expenses. This is not including any income or anything like that. This is basic utilities, basic living, transportation, food, etc. So I want to dive a little deeper into those numbers so we can look and see where exactly they came from. Over the last 5 years, since 2017, rental prices in Corvallis have leapt up 30%, and this is according to the City of Corvallis Community and Development data they have through ArcGIS. In that same time range, single-family residence home sale prices have jumped up 57%. It's actually, the graphs that they have are just incredible. Like I knew personally that I had seen rent increase and house prices increase, but the data just speaks for itself and how much, not just inflation, but just the cost of living for living physically in a home has gone way up. So if you're looking for some families that don't have the budget to wiggle room to pay higher rent prices or even purchase a family home, sometimes they have to look elsewhere live further out in the city so that they can actually afford housing, which brings us to gas prices over just the last year. So this is from AAA's overview of gas prices for Corvallis and surrounding cities. Corvallis actually has the smallest percentage increase in just the last calendar year with 44% price and gas change since that time period. Albany, Salem, and Eugene all have had higher leaps in the price of gas. So even if you can't afford to live in the city with the rent and housing price increase, if you're traveling outside the city from surrounding metro areas, you're still paying the difference in the cost of gas, which is just outrageous at this time.
So on that graph, are you saying that it's around, looks like 3,200, it's jumped to, so basically it's jumped about $1,300? That's it?
Oh, no, sorry, there's an extra zero in that graph. That's $5.
Okay.
So yeah,
Thank
I don't
you.
know what that formatting got
I should
out
put
there.
my
It's
glasses
3
on.
decimal points.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Good.
I just didn't have
It's
my
right.
glasses on, never mind.
That's what the gas
Yeah,
station do too.
Yes, that's why it did 3 numbers. Yeah, okay, sorry. I should have changed it on the y-axis. My apologies. Okay, but yeah, and then so gas. So we talked about home, housing, gas, and then food. Prices of food have also increased due to the insane inflation we've been experiencing this year. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, so the Consumer Price Index as of March 2022, we've experienced a 7.9% jump in at-home food. So this is not including eating out. This is just at-home food that you purchase for consuming and making at home. And USDA forecasts are predicting a 3 to 4% increase in the price of food by the end of 2022. So we haven't even seen the end of this inflation just yet. Housing, food, and gas prices are all just increasing at incredible rates. So we talked to some of our members about how they budgeted around this and what they can actually do with their current wages to kind of account for this. So these are the following examples we have are real budgets from classified members who I will keep anonymous, but just know that they were brave enough to allow us to share this data with you all. This is personal info from them. So our first example is going to be a staff member who has worked over 5 years with the district. They are an EA in life skills with 182 calendar days on range 12. Their take-home pay is $1,700. Their rent, so this is just kind of to visually show where their take-home pay and like the different types of expenses they have. Notice how there's no incidentals in here. We actually aren't including any active medical expenses. These are just medical debt that this staff or this member included in theirs. This is all just basics of surviving. This isn't including eating out or weekend activities. So just to put it into percentages so we can see exactly what they're spending their money on. Over 43% of their take-home income is spent on just rent in the city. And this staff member did share that they are in a communal housing. So this is with roommates. They are still spending 43% of their budget on housing. They did also share with us, so you can see how the rest of the line falls, which means they only have $200 left over for their savings and or buffer in case there are other expenses that come up, which is only 12.9% of their paycheck. So this is just exemplifying how strained the classified staff budget is. And I want to move on to our second example. Again, these are just real examples from our classified staff. This is another member who's been with us for over 5 years in an EA2 position. They work slightly less calendar days and are on a lower step range. And their take-home pay is only $1,500. Now remember, back in an earlier slide, the average cost of living for Core Valley was around $1,500. So this person is just absolutely strapped. And they're not even including things like their incidentals as well, no eating out. They do have a small coffee budget, but it takes up less than 0.1% of their total. And this graph showing or the pie chart showing exactly where their income and expenses breaks down. I wanted to create a separate graph that didn't do the full breakdown of where their money is going, just expenses versus savings. They were only able to save 0.6% of their budget every month. Essentially, all of their money is going towards expenses on their position or on the wages that they have gotten from the district. And again, this employee has been with the district for 6 years. So over 5 years, they've gone up the step ranges, but they're still just squeaking by on the income that they have. And obviously they love being with the district, but especially with the inflation that they've seen with their housing, gas, and food prices going up as well, they don't have any wiggle room to be able to account for those price increases. So we just want to exemplify how strained our staff members are. And just comparing the two budgets right next to each other, we can see that similar positions, so like similar ranges close by to each other, there's not much buffer in their budget for these massive inflation, massive cost of living increases that we've all experienced. So even though the percentages are the same, not everyone experiences the increases differently. So I want to take a step back and do a broader look at the wage analysis for classified staff as a whole in the district. This is a histogram of the expected annual wages of each staff member based on the calculations provided in the spreadsheet given to us. The y-axis is the number of employees that are in that wage range. So each column represents a range. So for example, the column on the far left is employees that make between $1,500 and $5,000. And then stepping up, the second column is $5,500 to $9,400. So these numbers are a range. And I'm going to put in some actual data into the table as well so you can see those numbers. The majority of our classified staff make less than $29,000 in an entire calendar year. And remember, this is gross pay. This is not net pay. So they're making even less than that. And according to the federal poverty guidelines, 125% for above the federal poverty guidelines for a family of four is that 29,000 marker. So the majority of our staff fall under, are at that range. And Oregon actually increased its SNAP, the guideline for SNAP. So anyone that falls under 200% of the FPG will qualify for SNAP benefits in Oregon, which means that we have employees that qualify for it and employees that are actually using SNAP while being employed by the district right now. And to put that into perspective, that means the majority of our staff, so that's 68.8% make less than $29,000, and that's 350 employees. Like these aren't just numbers; these are actual people who are doing their best to make it by each day and are just trying to survive and thrive in the community around them. But the cost of living is just increased so much; they're struggling to make ends meet. And I really want to exemplify that it's a lot of staff in the district that are experiencing this hardship right now. So we wanted to compare some of these wages that current staff are making to the market rates available in the district itself, or in the surrounding community itself. So we did a lot of research into similar job types compared to their district classification. So we have food services and food service assistants and food service specialists. Starting wages are $14.17 and $14.75. We did some research into similar food serving positions, like a server at Jersey Mike's, a meat cutter at Market of Choice, and working as it's called a buyer one at Oregon Freeze Dry, but the job description matched the food handling and kind of the processing and packaging involved that our food service assistants would be doing. And as you can see, the starting wages at each of those jobs is higher, or the range is higher than the starting wages of our food service assistants themselves, and they have more hours available. So the projected annual salary of these positions is greater than what the staff are making currently at these jobs. So I mean, they're serving food that they themselves may not be able to afford at that rate. So this is why we just want to exemplify that even though the district wages aren't keeping up with the market rates in multiple areas. And we did this similar type of research for not just the food services family, but also the instructional assistant wage comparisons as well. Specifically, we are looking at like working with disabled adults in the community and what the pay ranges would be there. So starting wages for the educational assistants are hovering around $16 and $19, depending on the job duties outlined in those two positions. And they are up to between $15 and $25, depending on the position you're looking at, which means that their yearly income is almost double of what they are making in the current classified positions. So these people don't need these jobs aren't requiring extra qualifications. We specifically did research into job requirements that have similar duties and similar qualifications to the district. They are literally making more doing similar things with other companies in the surrounding area. And this isn't like Portland or Seattle. This is like literally Corvallis, Albany, Salem. It's the surrounding area. And then we did this with, I don't want to be a broken clock, but we did this with technology family as well. And it's just outrageous what the market rates are currently going for right now compared to what the same position is making with the district. So the wages just aren't keeping up and and as cost of living has increased, our wages as classified staff have not. So our goal is to just exemplify and show that we're not being paid what our labor is worth, and the passion tax of staying with a district that has like continuous employment but doesn't pay as well. It's forcing a lot of turnover. The number of employees that have been with the district for less than 3 years is higher than it's been in, I forget what number was, Mary and I talked about it, but we have a lot of new employees with a high turnover currently. And I do want to just jump back to this graph showing the gross annual wages. The employees, especially the employees at the lower ends of the salary ranges, aren't getting paid what they're worth. And our goal as a union is to work is to bargain for them and get them the raises that they not only deserve, but that the market demands in these times. So finally, this is what it costs to live in our community, and our classified wages need to reflect that worth.
So, and I'm gonna read it because I wrote it down. This was going to be Mary, and so I wrote it down to make sure I would say it correctly. Before we go into the financial proposal from Hobie, during bargaining last year, we jointly committed to reviewing the current salary schedule to look at possibly changing it. We have a good start for a proposed schedule and want to have a date set for a committee meeting prior to the end of bargaining. So before we finish our bargaining and agree on a contract, we want to have a date set for a meeting and with a goal for implementing a new salary schedule for the 23-24 school year. But we really do want to start making that change that we talked about for the last couple of years.
So, and I think Jennifer said it right earlier, you know, we gotta remember the kids, that's why a lot of us are here. But, you know, it gets to a point where folks gotta think about their own kids. They can't be in a position where they cannot make ends meet for their families, no matter how impassioned they are to work for the children. So I think what you've seen illustrates some of the things we're up against, and so we just wanna make sure that you understand that I don't think anybody around this table is gonna say they're not here for the kids, but that only can go so far because the kids need to have quality people here too, you know, and that's just something I want to point out. It's a very basic proposal because you guys on your contract, put your stuff when you're in the back with the sales, and I didn't want to go through the whole scale until we figure out what we're doing and change everything every time we make a new proposal. So I figured this is a lot easier. And there's a couple on here we could maybe even see it today. Well, that makes sense. Yeah, thank you. A few extras for the folks that are here too. All right, so we call this the ABC proposal because it's kind of a catch-all. Obviously, we're just talking about here, we're looking for a $4 across the board raise to try to get us, you know, in striking distance some of these wages you saw up here. And then below that, the things that we might actually be able to agree to today is just a cleanup committee at the end, double check make sure we're getting everything formatted correctly, make sure all of our stuff is, you know, grammatically correct and the typos are out. So we don't have to do that every time necessarily just for the new language. And then the second thing would that'd be like at least a 2-person committee. It wouldn't have to be a big committee. And then the other one we've kind of been doing as we're going along, and we assume you probably have no problem with, is making the gender terms neutral, just using neutral terms. So that's essentially it for this ABC proposal. And with that, we are done. Any questions?
Have you costed out your proposal?
No, we did not. Nothing beyond the back of the napkin, just kind of gives us a rough idea. But I would say if that's something you're interested in, I know you guys are very smart over there, but you're figure that out.
I think so.
Ready for some caucus time?
Yes.
All right.